Okay, big news just dropped. A landmark US-EU trade deal. It's a massive rebalance, 15% on EU exports, almost nothing on US goods, and Europe's making huge purchase commitments. But here's what I'm wondering. Does this reset the post-war order, or just kick off new tariff wars? Who are the real winners and losers here? And what's next for global trade? Stick around as we dive deep into all the details.
We're going to talk about our first thing. We're getting right into it with the more trade deals issue. We're talking about the EU here. Gary, the US and EU reached a trade deal. Thing number one, EU trade deal. What do we need to know?
So, Rob, I'm actually in Europe right now. And over the weekend, I went from Prague to Vienna, and then on Monday or Sunday rather, from Vienna to Budapest. And then later this week, I'm headed to Mallorca, Spain. And along the way, I talk to people, and one of the things that's terrific about Europeans, they all want to give me their view of economics, of President Trump, of everything going on. So it's really interesting to get their impressions of things. I don't think the newspapers are doing anybody any favors here. Really interesting to talk to the individuals. But going to the data, the US and the EU reached a major trade agreement. Last week, they're rebalancing the relationship between the world's two largest economies. After months of negotiation, the deal has laid the groundwork for tariffs, market access, and economic cooperation. The U.S. is going to charge a 15% EU export tariffs on most products. There are some exceptions, with tariffs on American goods dropping below the current average of 1%, right around zero. Additionally, the EU is eliminating all tariffs on U.S. industrial goods exports. That's a big win for President Trump. He's doing everything he can to try to increase the amount of U.S. manufacturing that's happening. And there also are some aspects of the deal where Europe is going to be buying a lot of U.S. products. This deal represents a dramatic change in transatlantic policy. Prior efforts have made zero progress. This deal put purchase commitments in order as well, securing EU plans to buy more American products, reducing the increasing deficit with the EU. And worth noting, there's some valid criticism. There are a lot of people who believe the EU doesn't have enough demand to purchase the promised energy commitments. I think they promised something like $750 billion. And people have pointed out, wait, is the EU actually using that much? Can they buy that much? So it's possible that there will be some disappointments along the way, and that some aspects of the deal are going to be renegotiated or adjusted by the time they're on the final paper. But I think the deal looks like a big plus for the United States right now, and that seems to be the takeaway for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, it makes sense there, Gary. Obviously, we'd be interested on your thoughts. Yeah, is that supply there, right? Or is that necessary from the EU? But then also, I think I was watching as well, the deal is a little bit different, I think, than some of the leaders were expecting. So help us shake through that, right? What did this deal actually end up looking like versus what might have been expected?
Yeah, so the general sense of this was a very one-sided deal. Very much to the advantage of the United States. The United States has a gigantic trade deficit with the EU. And so, President Trump said, look, you guys, and people will say, well, wait, is it all tariffs? No, part of it is the EU for a long time has had tariffs against U.S. products. But in addition to that, there's all kinds of help and support they provide for their own industries. Last month, we pointed out that when central bankers were meeting in Sintra, Portugal, which at the time was like 20 miles from where I was in Lisbon, Rob, that is some serious typing there. You are zipping along. Anyway, these central bankers, they gave a round of applause to Jerome Powell, who said, hey, we're not lowering rates because we're worried about we're worried about potential inflation from these deals. But they gave him a standing ovation for that, but completely forgot somehow that their economies have some pretty giant tariffs, which somehow they're okay with. So President Trump was making a big effort to balance things out. A couple of weeks ago, I praised DKI's interns for writing that President Trump was monetizing access to the U.S.'s huge consumer market. Guess what? He completely nailed it. some of the U.S. Some of the European trade negotiators basically said that they were trying to contain the damage. The article in the Wall Street Journal noted that tariffs of 15% are certainly a challenge for some. That quote came from European Commission President Ursula von Leyen. But she said we should not forget it keeps the EU's access to the American market. So, I mean, that's really the big news here, that the United States has these big trade deficits with all these countries, and President Trump is saying, you know what, you want access to the U.S. market? Enough. We need to have production here too, and he's successfully been enforcing that. So that's what's happened there, and countries are rolling over, saying, you know what, we don't want to lose this business. We're afraid of being excluded. And that's why things came out very much in favor of the United States.